Thank you so much for that introduction. I am Kim Rutledge, the Executive Director of the Wildlife Rescue Center, and our website is mowildlife.org, and I'll put that back up at the end. But just to quickly go through our mission, we are a professional wildlife rehabilitation organization. So we rehabilitate injured, sick, and orphaned native wildlife and release healthy animals to their natural habitat. Through educational outreach, the center provides environmental awareness, promotes a harmonious relationship with native wildlife, and encourages the community to protect our delicate ecosystems. So very fitting for Earth Day. And here are some of our volunteers hard at work. I believe they are all feeding little orphaned groundhogs, of course. So we admit about 3,500 patients a year, and those are the ones that actually have to come in. We field over 20,000 inquiries from the public related to wildlife issues, wildlife conflicts. So we get a lot of phone calls and emails and questions. Not every one of those results in an animal coming in, but some of them, of course, do. And we are funded completely by donation. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and 95% of our workforce is volunteer. So we rely very heavily on our community, and we have a great family of staff, volunteers, and supporters. And today we're going to talk about keeping wild families together. So this is something really important all the time. But right now, when babies are being born and we have lots and lots of wildlife out and about, this is some of the things that when I first became involved with wildlife rehabilitation, I was so amazed to learn how much we just don't know about the animals that live around us. And what can we do to give them space to do their thing, do their jobs, and while we're sharing space and they're sharing space with us. So we want to do everything that we can. When somebody calls us about a wildlife issue, if it's about a baby, we want to do what we can to make sure that we can keep those babies healthy and with healthy parents whenever possible. So these little guys, you can see these are just examples of a mama possum with babies, a mama raccoon with a baby, and an adult white-tailed deer with her baby. So this is beautiful, and we want to help facilitate this, and there's things that we can do to keep these guys out there. Giving wildlife space can often mean needing to accommodate for them as they figure out how to negotiate through a landscape that's been really changed by people. So right now, especially, we're getting lots and lots of calls from people who have seen either adult geese and ducks or even nesting in suburban and urban areas, in Home Depot parking lots, in the parking lot of the Weight Watchers in Baldwin, in bank parking lots, just everywhere. We have mom and dad geese, mom ducks, mom and dad geese that are hatching eggs, building their nests, laying their eggs, hatching their eggs. And right now they have started to hatch. So we get calls about those geese in strange places and talk people through what normal behavior is. There's nothing that needs to be done. We'll just give them the space that they need to raise their babies. And when the babies hatch, after incubating for about 4 weeks, they are going to start hatching. That takes about a day. And then after about 24 hours, the little babies are going to be fluffy and dry. And mom and dad are going to take them on a walk from the nest to the water source that they already had in their mind. That water source can be up to a mile from where the nest is. So they cross roads and parking lots and are, very visible while they're taking their babies to that source of water. And the best thing that you can do, and the best advice we can give, is give them space. If it's safe for you to, facilitate them crossing a road, stop your car so that they can get across. That's the absolute best thing for these guys. When humans do try to intervene, it usually ends up scattering the family, and then it's a bigger problem. We have babies separated from parents and angry parents and all kinds of things. So knowing when to let mom and dad do their thing is really important, especially for these guys. All wild babies are always going to be better off staying with their parents. This photo is in there because this is where most of our education takes place, is on the phone. This is one of our volunteers, Jenna, and our phone rings just pretty much nonstop this time of year. Lots of people calling in because they have concerns, and we help them figure out, is there something wrong? Do we need to intervene? And when babies are involved, what we want to do is prevent abduction with intent to rescue. So this is a term that wildlife rehabilitators came up with to basically, we're talking about accidentally kidnapping wild babies from their parents. And when you, especially for us who are animal people, when we see a baby animal and it's by itself, you're gonna go through that gut-wrenching feeling of like, oh my God, is it okay? Is it gonna be okay? What can I do? I wanna make sure that it's okay. And that is completely normal and definitely something that we all feel. The best thing that we can do is get education out there so that we can help people understand that at least both of these situations. So we've got a baby fawn and we have a baby eastern cottontail, and both of these guys are very young, but they're completely healthy and exhibiting totally normal behavior, and no intervention needs to happen. So we get into a little bit of a grayer area when we have situations like this. So this is a fawn, but he's obviously, not in the grass. He's not in the woods. This is a little nest of cottontails that was maybe disturbed by, in doing yard work, or maybe a dog came across the nest. And this is a very, very young eastern gray squirrel. That at that age, there are sometimes it's difficult to even tell what kind of baby it is. So in these situations, people are going to call us, and we want people to call early before they have intervened, so we can walk through the process to find out what does need to happen. So let's take this little guy, for example. So this isn't something that would concern me immediately looking at it. It looks like mom put this baby in a very conspicuous location. And we understand that this photo of mom with baby is kind of what we expect. Like if there's a really young baby, where's mom? Why is she not right there? And in this photo, this is probably a baby that was just born. So that's why mom is there cleaning him up, and he looks a little fuzzy, so we can tell that that's what's happening here. But mom is by herself. She's raising the baby as a single working mama, and she's got to eat enough leaves to make milk now for this baby. So that is her full-time job. I have to eat all the leaves. And so she's going to leave that baby alone by itself for the first couple weeks of life, because he's not strong enough to follow her around yet, and he's not eating leaves. And it's going to be a little bit until he's big enough, like in this next picture, when he's about 2, 3, 4 weeks old, he's going to be big and strong enough that they're going to walk around together. They might be separated a little bit, but these fawns, when they're really young, they are just naturally, their instinct is to stay still. If they were on a sun-dappled forest floor, they'd blend right in. They're very, very difficult to see. I speak from experience. Even when you know they're there and you can hear them, they're really hard to spot. If they're on your front porch, though, they're not as difficult to spot. So we field lots and lots of calls from people in suburban and urban areas who have fawns in their yard, and it's almost never a situation where we need to intervene. But we do spend a lot of time counseling folks. And in the case with this one by the window, or similar situations, mom will come back, feed the baby sometimes, and leave it there again. So they're alone by themselves in those early days for about 22 hours a day. And mom is close by and keeping an eye on things, but she's not going to be right there with them. So this is a situation where that fawn is completely healthy. That's exactly what we want to see. When a fawn is in trouble, they're going to be stumbling around. They're going to be crying constantly for a really extended period of time. You might, if there's visible injuries, then that would be a situation where there's a problem. But if it's just a little quiet fawn, even if they get up and move around a little, most likely they're completely fine. And this little dude was just fine. So with this cottontail nest, let's say that this was disturbed. Cottontail rabbits are actually the #1 animal that we admit because they are so prolific and they're gotten very good at living in close proximity to people. So mother rabbits, one adult rabbit can have 6 litters in 1 year. So these guys are commonly encountered. But the great thing about rabbits is that they're pretty tolerant. If you uncover a nest, even if a nest is completely destroyed, as long as it can be at least, sort of rebuilt in the same location, mom will continue to come back. And you are never going to see the mother rabbit. It's very, very rare. She will put her nest out in the middle of a yard. Those babies don't have a scent. Neither do fawns, by the way. But the babies don't have a smell. They stay very small. They're in a very teeny tiny area. They're covered with dry grass. And many of us have rabbit nests in our yard. They grow up and move on and we never see them. If a nest is discovered and disturbed, then we will advise people to do like a tic-tac-toe pattern with sticks over the top of the nest. And this is a mock-up. And that's one way that you can look, and you leave that overnight. Mom's going to only come during the evening. And you can see if the sticks have been disturbed, and that's a good indicator that mom came by. But sometimes even if the sticks aren't disturbed, it doesn't mean that they haven't been fed. Sometimes mom can kind of slide up along the side, the babies come out and they eat and they go back in. And rabbits have milk that's very, very rich. It's much higher in fat content and calories than other mammal milk. And the stomach capacity of a baby is actually twice the stomach capacity of similar sized animals. So this little guy down at the bottom, this would be sort of the last step we would take if someone's concerned that a rabbit nest is orphaned, is walking them through how to gently take a baby out and turn it over and look at its little belly. Because you can see this little guy's tummy is all puffed out, and I can see that it's whitish where it should be. I can see that this baby has a full belly of milk. So this baby is taken care of and should go right back in the nest and everything is fine. Cottontails are actually only dependent on their parents for about 21 days. And by the age of 3 weeks, they are weaned and on their own. And they're still pretty little at this age. They're about the size of a tennis ball. And as they're going through that transition at about 3 to 4 weeks, they will be out and be visible. And sometimes instead of fleeing and running away, they will freeze in that fight or flight. There's also freeze. So we will get calls because somebody found a young rabbit and they think it's orphaned and needs help. And it's really just a weaned rabbit that needs one extra shot at staying out of sight. So if you come across a rabbit that's the size of a tennis ball or larger and has ears that are sticking up like that, and it doesn't have any injuries, anything like that, then we would advise you to find a nice quiet place somewhere where they can be hidden underneath some brush and just stick them under the brush. And that's a lot of times that's all that they need. They just need one little extra chance to make it as a bunny in the world. So this situation with the little squirrel that we saw, this little guy is way, way too little to be out of the nest. And so something has happened here. They've become separated, and that can happen for a number of reasons. It could be that a nest was damaged by a storm and fell out of a tree. It could be that tree trimmers cut a tree nest down or cut a tree down and there was a nest in a tree cavity. It can even be a situation where a nest is found in a human structure, like a house, and those animals need to be evicted. But even in those cases, we can evict the mom, but still give her those babies, and she will move them to a different nest, which she has already. And most species have alternate places where they can raise their young because they have a backup plan. That's how they've been successful. So with this little guy, we would want to make sure that he's healthy, get him warmed up if he needs to be, and we're going to put him out at a place where mom can get him. So this is a little mock-up. That's a stuffed animal squirrel. But you would do something like this: a box, a bucket, a basket, and possibly a heat source, depending on the weather. It could be a sock filled with rice, microwaved. It could be chemical hot hands we use a lot of times and will advise people to use. But you would want to get this baby warmed up and get him out in an area where he can be reunited as quickly as possible. And there's about a 48-hour window where we would want to leave this baby out there only in the daytime, and we can and have provided supportive care if needed. But if mom's moved, let's say the nest was blown down and she's got 4 babies, she can only move 1 at a time. So we're going to put those in that container, and she is going to come down, get those babies, hold them by the skin on their belly, and they just kind of wrap around her head like you can see here, and she's going to take them off to the nest. And we've seen moms carrying like big teenager babies like that, and they've got another place to take them. So if we give them the opportunity, then that's what they're going to do. Reuniting is also super important for Canada goslings, and these guys are hatching. They're pretty young right now. Canada goslings are an animal that they become easily habituated in captivity. So we do everything that we can to reunite them with their families. And that's what's happening in this photo. So this is a firefighter who most likely rescued these guys from a storm drain. And you can see mom and dad Goose are right there, very eager to have those babies back and getting them all back together so they can be raised by Mama Goose and Papa Goose is going to be best for them. So when people call us and they find a single gosling, we advise them to look around for the family and try to get those guys back together. This is a reunite story from a few years ago. This was Ellisville. The police officer there, his name is Andy. He's a friend of mine in the Ellisville Police Department. And he came in, we were called and he was called and responded and got there first to get some mallard ducklings out of a storm drain right at Kiefer Creek and Manchester. And by the time I got there, they had gotten the babies out. And when we've discovered where the water source was because of the lay of the land, I wasn't able to just walk that container from where we were to the water. If I had, mom would have followed me. I actually had to capture mom, but I did so successfully, and we just drove sort of the long way around and were able to take them to her water source, open up the crate, and they all just zoomed right out and got to stay together. So those are definitely the best rescues that we do when an animal doesn't actually have to come into the center. With mallards, it's interesting because their family, if they have a group of ducklings, all of those ducklings have to be reintroduced to them at the same time. If you give babies back 1 at a time, sometimes mom gets nervous, and let's say she has 7 ducklings and you're giving them back 1 at a time, she gets 4 and she might take off. And then she's like, nope, that's fine. That's all I need. I'm not going to come back to the others. So there's little nuances about different species that are important to know, but we're very happy to walk people through those processes. And we have been known in situations, if we have a mom with babies, we might sneak 1 or 2 more in there if they're the same size. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in just a second. This was another one of my favorite reuniting stories. So this was a few years ago. These 2 little baby red foxes were rescued by the Humane Society. They responded to a call from a homeowner who heard these babies who had fallen into a storm drain. Doesn't usually happen with foxes, but it did with these guys. So Humane Society went out. They were able to open the storm drain and go down, get these babies, and they brought them to us. And that is a logical thing to do. When they got there, we asked, for some more information. These guys were yelling at us. They definitely didn't want to be with us, which is great. That's what we want to see. But as we asked some of the questions, we said, do you think that the homeowners would let us bring these babies back if we can make that culvert safe so they don't fall down? And they said, I don't know, you can call them. So we did. We called them back and we said, hey, these guys are perfectly healthy and they haven't been separated from their parents long. Would it be okay if we try to put them back? And they said yes. So this is a picture from the street. You can see that little fence in the background is the shed. And then behind that shed was another one of these culverts, and that's where the babies fell in. The homeowners let us put the babies actually into the shed. There were a few floorboards that were missing. And so we blocked off that end of the culvert. And as soon as we put the babies back down in there, they just went right back into their den. And we set up a camera to make sure that the parents were coming back. And so we left that there overnight and got it the next day. And we're able to confirm that the parents, it would be both parents in this case, were definitely coming back, taking care of those babies. And the homeowners kept us updated and really, really enjoyed watching them grow up. They came back several years after that, and it turned into just a really fantastic experience for everybody. So I mentioned we've snuck in a couple of Canada geese here and there, or a couple mallards in that situation. Wild fostering is a process where basically you take an animal and give it to a family of the same species, but not necessarily that animal's family. There are lots of species that will adopt other babies. It's most likely happening way, way more than we realize. And Canada geese are one of those animals that will adopt. So here is a couple of Canada adults. They did not hatch all those babies. That's way too many eggs. But their natural behavior is to kind of share the load. So you might see a lake where there are several pairs, adults of Canada geese, and you might see one pair that has 900 goslings, and that's completely normal. So when we do get babies in, which is happening right now, we look for property owners who will give us permission to bring a single gosling or two goslings if they have geese on their property who have babies of the same size. The most important thing is that we have to have that permission from the property owner. We do often get reports of where baby geese are, but sometimes people don't want to have the geese in that location, which we understand. They can be a little ornery at times. We do work with an organization called Geese Peace St. Louis, and they can help with population maintenance and control where it's totally humane. You basically just do egg addling. It prevents the eggs from hatching, but it allows the parents to go through that natural process. But when they do hatch and they are here, it's very, very helpful to be able to get these babies to Canada geese that can raise them. They do much, much better in that circumstance. Wild wood ducks are also a species that very, very readily accept babies and adopt babies. Wood ducks are super duper shy. They're tree nesters, so sometimes when the babies hatch, they actually jump out of the tree and just fall at like 20 feet and sort of bounce, and they're completely fine. But they can get separated from mom if mom gets scared off, and we'll get big groups of wood ducks in. Wood ducks are very, very difficult to raise in captivity. They're super delicate and very high stress. But if we do have a lake on our property, and we usually have at least one or two wood duck moms with babies, and even though they're really shy and terrified of people, when we go out there with a wood duck baby that's healthy and peeping, mom will show herself and, keep her distance, but basically be like, oh my gosh, how did you get my baby? And you put the baby down, and they run across the water to each other, and it's beautiful. And she takes the baby and raises it. So it's something that wildlife rehabilitators need to do, because we have finite resources and finite time to take care of animals that need to be with us, which is why it's so important not to remove animals from healthy parents. But for these situations where these animals are naturally adopting, we want to facilitate that as much as we can, because it's so good for everyone involved. We have successfully wild fostered some cottontails. If we have a staff member or volunteer with a nest of cottontails in their yard, we've been known to put one extra in there and have seen that be extremely successful. And we have seen incredible success with wild fostering or cross fostering canids. So this is actually a Mexican gray wolf that was born at Endangered Wolf Center. And wild fostering has been one of their methods that they work with the federal government and with species survival plans to save endangered species. And being a part of that, because of what we learned from working with some of these common species, we've been able to be useful to Endangered Wolf Center and that effort in general to help get these babies to the wild. So this is a photo down there in the green shirt. That's Regina Masati. She's the director of animal care and conservation at Endangered Wolf. But when she got her start in animal care, she worked at the Wildlife Rescue Center with me like 20 years ago. So we've known each other forever. And have a great partnership with them. And a few years ago, she asked me if I would be her backup for cross fostering these babies. So they're born in captivity at Endangered Wolf Center to those wild wolves that are captive. And then when they're very, very young, just less than, just days old, some of those babies can be transported to the wild where the Mexican gray wolf population is in New Mexico and Arizona, and put in with wild dens and wild parents and other wild siblings. So they need a person who is able to, oh, see, there's Amelia making an appearance. They need a person who is able to care for those babies, to feed them, and someone who's handled lots and lots and lots of young wild animals, which I have. So that was just an amazing experience. And it's something that the public can really get behind, the idea of putting baby animals in the wild. And then you're rooting for those, and it is helping these endangered species, some of the most endangered species on the planet, like Mexican gray wolves and hopefully red wolves, to recover. We need those. We need our wildlife. They have very important jobs to do, and we need our ecosystems to be complete. And this is an example of how local wildlife rehabilitation helps endangered species and animals that aren't even necessarily local to us, but it really does have a far expanding reach. And that's a very, very neat thing to be a part of. But with wildlife rehab, people have the tendency to want to see a baby animal, and they think that ensuring that it's going to be okay means getting it into the care of somebody like the Wildlife Rescue Center, which, if that is necessary because that animal is orphaned, that's absolutely the right thing to do. But the first question we should be asking ourselves when we see these babies is, what can we do to keep them in the wild, to keep these families together and healthy? And for folks that are interested in this kind of presentation, you're probably animal people, and people come to you with questions too. So I think it's fantastic for you guys to have this information. And that is the entirety of the presentation. I'm very, very happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was awesome.
I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What would you advise for a turtle that's getting ready to cross a road? Do you advise to let it make its way, just like with the ducks, just make sure traffic doesn't,
Yeah.
get it, or just, can you help it across? Or...
Yeah, you can. So the most important thing is always making sure that you are safe. So whatever you need to do to stay safe, sometimes it's not safe to get out of your car. That happens, right. and it's important to not get out of your car and risk your life. But if you can, in all of these cases, with the geese or with turtles, with a turtle, absolutely, if it's safe for you to get out of the car and pick that turtle up and you can tell which direction it's going, just move them over and put them in the grass. That's definitely the best thing to do. You never want to move a turtle away from the area that it is in, because they're very dependent on knowing their surroundings. They know where their water is, they know where their food is, they know where their mates are, and they know where they hibernate. And so studies have been done that if you move a turtle not very far, even a mile or 2 miles, then it greatly reduces their chances of survival. Okay. So moving them across the road is definitely the right thing to do. if you can be a crossing guard for a family of ducks or geese, then that's, definitely a wonderful thing to do. Just obviously make sure that you're safe.
Right, right. Thank you.
I have a question about bunnies. We just had a situation with our pooches out back. We had a nest, and just about the exact time that we discovered it, so did one of our dogs.
Mhm.
And it's almost impossible. We have a large yard, and it's almost impossible to control the dogs when they're back there. We built a small fence around the nest, which was not very effective. Any really obvious things to or not to do in that?
So if you find a nest, and if there's any way to, keep your dog on a leash or walk your dog on a leash until those babies are done growing up, it's pretty easy to tell the age if we have a photo, or you can, look on the internet. If they're fully furred and their eyes are open, they're at least a week old, which means they'd be there for another 2 weeks. So would be the first line of defense. If that's not possible, which sometimes it isn't, you can put a pretty big barrier over the top of a cottontail nest, and mom will still go under there and feed. So you can take a wheelbarrow and put it over the nest with one end propped up with a brick. And if you can remove it at night, that's great. If you can't, she will still go under and feed, most likely. You can disable a lawnmower. Obviously, you would not want to start the lawnmower on the nest, but if you put the deck on the highest setting, you can put a lawnmower over the top of the nest, and she will very often still go under to feed the babies. So like I said, they're really pretty tolerant of disturbance. They will not tolerate a nest being moved. And if there are injured babies in the nest, they usually won't tolerate that. But we've had situations where somebody's come in and clear cut or cleared out because they were going to put down a paved stone, little porch area. And we had them leave that one paved stone where the nest was, just leave that one out, recreate the nest as best you can. And mom kept feeding those babies. And a few weeks later, they put that last paved stone in when the nest wasn't occupied. So they will deal with a lot if you can just facilitate keeping that nest there, giving her access, keeping pets away as much as you can. But those are all options.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question in chat. Erica asked, do you have any suggestions for bats?
For bats, absolutely. Depending on the situation, if it's a situation where there are bats in an attic or a structure and they need to be evicted, there are some regulations involved because we do have little brown bats. They are endangered, but we work with a couple of organizations that help with bats. If they're not in a structure, then we're just, pro bat. Like if you see a bat, that's awesome. If you have a situation where they're in the home and their feces is usually what would maybe present a problem. There's a whole process of setting up a bat house on the outside, a bat baffle, which allows them to leave, but won't allow them to get back in. And you put those bat houses there as an alternative for them. And then they can live in those bat houses on the outside. Missouri Bat Census and Humane Wildlife Solutions are two of the organizations. Missouri Bat Census is a nonprofit that does study of bats. Humane Wildlife Solutions is the only local company that does wildlife issue management in a truly humane way. And that involves evicting animals, not trapping and relocating, which is not humane. It's often advertised as humane, but it isn't. And we can use an animal's natural behavior to evict them, similar to reuniting. And I mentioned that animals are going to have an alternate nest site. So the same thing if you have raccoons in your attic, squirrels in your attic, something under your porch, whenever possible, it's best to let those babies be raised and then fix the problem so they can't get back in. But if that is not possible, then there are steps you can take to basically harass the family into moving, but they will move to a place that they know and they'll take their babies with them. Relocating wildlife, animals don't survive if they're picked up and moved to a different location. They will try to get back home, and relocating entire families is a heartbreaking situation. There's just no way that mom or dad can deal with that if they're just picked up and taken somewhere else. It's just not a good thing for them. I am happy to answer a more specific fact question if needed.
She says thank you, so I think you answered it. Does anyone else have a question?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, please.
There's sparrows living in our house. But what? And I don't know which ones are babies, which ones are not babies. How can you tell them apart?
So the little baby birds are going to have less feathers and they're going to be little. And songbirds are going to fledge, which means they're going to come out of the nest before they can totally fly. So if you see a bird out and about and he's got feathers, but he's just kind of hopping around, that is a fledgling. And those guys are totally fine too. They come out of the nest before they can fly, but mom and dad still take care of them. So if they're hopping around, the best thing to do is keep people and pets away, watch them from inside if you can, but mom and dad are usually still taking care of them.
Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay. All right, anybody else?
Well, it's not really I guess it's a question, but when you talked about the wolves being raised by foster wild wolves or captured wolves, and then the babies taken to live in the wild, is that hard on the foster mother to take that cub away from her to live in
the mom in captivity?
Yeah.
So they are very cautious at Endangered Wolf. They never take all of the babies away. So the wolves that live in Endangered Wolf, they are wild. They are hands-off. They're not habituated. They're part of the species survival plan. But whenever, and that job is super, super important because these animals numbers are, very, very low. We're talking about, basically zero red wolves in the wild, and Mexican gray wolves, their numbers are still below 500. So these ones that are in captivity are super important to help get that wild population back up. But they would take babies, only a portion of them. They don't take all of them because they want that mom to go through that process. It's definitely part of the consideration.
Thank you.
What was you said Humane Wildlife Solutions, and then what was the other one you said?
Missouri Bat Census. They're a network of people and they do several different things, but they're very great for, they're a resource just for information on dealing with bats. They have a few bat rehabilitators in their ranks that we work with, but they're a really good group.
Okay, I'm trying to get the census. Okay. Do they have a website, do you think?
I'm not 100% sure. I think they have a Facebook page.
They do. So I'll just put this in the chat and then people can find it on Facebook. And I found the website for the Humane Wildlife Solutions. Missouri Bat Census. Facebook. I have a question. I've heard a lot about wild moms being very protective. Is that ever an issue? Like wild moms attacking humans who are trying to save?
It can be. It's, it's pretty rare. With geese, absolutely. There have been times when, a Canada goose will have a nest like on a roof of a building that has a ledge, and so the babies hatch and they can't get out, or a courtyard in the middle of a school. So Canada geese, they definitely have their own personalities. It's not, all of them or none of them, but I've had a few encounters with adult Canadas when I was trying to, take babies from the roof and give them back, and those can be interesting. But there's ways around it. You can use umbrella, have partners there to help, facilitate. Mom squirrels are pretty amazing in, when we've seen some adult squirrels that just come really close to people to get their babies, not necessarily attacking or anything like that. And it's those littler guys, I guess, that maybe you wouldn't expect. With one of the amazing things that I learned about wolves, which I to talk about those guys again, is the fear that we have that's been perpetuated by, stories and things about wolves, and putting wild wolves in the den and working with the wild wolves at Endangered Wolf. They just don't want to have anything to do with us. They absolutely keep their distance, and they're just magnificent. But I would say Canada geese, with both parents there, are very attentive. Squirrels, pretty attentive. And wood ducks, just the fact that they will show themselves to get the baby, I just think is so brave, because they're so scared of people. But in general, when a human is around and interacting, mom's gonna be more likely to stay hidden and preserve herself, and live to have more babies than to intervene if somebody's picking up a fawn, or somebody's picking up a red fox, something like that. They're more likely to just keep their distance.
Cool. And somebody wants to know, have you ever rescued coyotes?
We have. Coyotes, we usually get a few adult coyotes a year. Coyotes are really super shy. We will see coyotes with mange, sometimes car strikes. We do occasionally get young coyotes in, and they are similar to, with red foxes, animals that require a lot of parental care growing up. So like rabbits are only with their parents for 21 days, so they're mostly instinctual. Coyotes and foxes that rely on their parents, the rehabilitation for those is a lot more complicated, because we have to be so cautious to make sure that they aren't habituated. We would never release an animal that didn't know that it needed to keep its distance from people, didn't have the skills that it needed to survive in the wild. But we do occasionally get coyotes and coyote pups.
Do you end up keeping some animals for like indefinitely if they are too used to humans, rather than releasing them?
We don't. So our facility in the state of Missouri and all states, there are regulatory agencies that give us permission, give us permits to do what we do. And there are always rules associated with that. In the state of Missouri, it is not possible to keep wildlife indefinitely, that are those animals that are taken from the wild. It's not really something that we would do, even if it was. I mean, there's just not wild animals being raised in captivity. Even if you do try to reinforce a human animal bond and habituate and try to make them tame, raising an animal like that does not make it domesticated. That's something that happens genetically over generations. So wild animals in general are not well suited for captivity, depending on the circumstances. There are definitely situations where ambassador animals are very useful in helping to teach people and reach people in a way that words can't necessarily. So we don't keep our wildlife patients, but we have in the past had resident animals as ambassadors, most of those that were born in captivity and are sort of rescues themselves. But if there is an animal that is not going to be able to be released to the wild, then we have limited options, and we do provide humane euthanasia, especially in cases where an animal's, suffering because it's severely injured. But we are a wildlife hospital. So the animals that come in to see us, they come in, our goal is to rehabilitate them and get them back out in the wild so they can do their job in the ecosystem.
Cool. Rowan and Maya asked, have you ever rescued any type of eagle?
I have not personally rescued eagles. We at our facility, we do treat birds, but we treat water birds like ducks and geese and herons and pelicans. Those are pretty exciting. I have rescued a few really big hawks, but I've never gotten my hands on an eagle, not yet, maybe someday.
Is there anything we should know about the Wildlife Rescue Center if we want to help, as far as donating or volunteering?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, 95% of our workforce is volunteer, and we've been on a new volunteer recruitment hold because of COVID. But we are really, really hoping that before the end of the year, we'll be able to onboard some new folks. So if you're interested, please check it out. All of that information is on our website. You can fill out an application and learn more. I mentioned our facility is funded 100% by donations. So we don't receive any local, state, or federal tax funding. Everything that we do is because we have a wonderful supporter group, community and family of supporters who believe in what we do and want us to have the resources to do it. So you can donate at mowildlife.org. We have a gift shop and have cool things available in the gift shop. You can be a monthly donor. We have a wish list. We are doing actually our first ever donation drive-through this Saturday. It's sort of an experimental event. We wanted to have some kind of engagement, still keep it short and safe, make sure that we're not, that we're all wearing our masks and doing our thing. But you can go to mowildlife.org and register for a time, see that donation drive-through wish list, just basic household items. We use unscented laundry detergent and unscented bleach and hand soap, some used linens and paper towels. Just taking care of 3,000 animals a year is a lot. And we will have 500 animals in the building in just a few weeks. We've got lots and lots of babies coming in. So we have lots of supplies that we need.
All right. Well, does anyone else have a question before we wrap it up? All right, I think we're good. Thank you so much, Kim.
Absolutely. Very, very happy to do it. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thanks everybody for coming today.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.